Hello and welcome to Context. I'm Enrico Wilford. Thank you for joining us on NCN. On this program, we are going to be looking at the outcome of what has been happening at GECOM and GECOM's readiness and preparedness for elections whenever those are going to be held. With us are Vincent Alexander and Desmond Trotman, and they are government-nominated commissioners on the Guyana Elections Commission. Gentlemen, welcome to Context.
Thank you very much, Henry.
And I hope I've described you correctly. You're government-nominated commissioners. You don't necessarily represent the government, right?
That is quite correct.
Now, put in context what has happened, particularly in the last day or so, and what is the way forward. Could I begin with you, Vincent?
Well, today is Wednesday. GECOM had its statutory meeting on Tuesday, as is usual. And at that meeting, 3 decisions were made. It was decided that we would communicate with the powers that be, that GECOM was incapable of meeting the 90 days deadline for the holding of elections. So that was the first decision that was made. That decision was made with a 3-2 vote and 1 abstention. I've noticed my colleague has attempted in the press to say that he did not abstain. The fact of the matter is he abstained and sought at the second vote on the second motion to recall his abstention, but that wasn't permissible. The second matter which was decided on was that having gotten information from the Ministry of Finance, advisory information, that we would advise the powers that be that GECOM would need an appropriation approved by the National Assembly if it were to conduct elections. Because the monies which we have are appropriations for things other than elections, including house registration, and therefore for the conduct of elections, an appropriation is required. And the third thing that was decided was that in the context of where we're at, that we would be carrying out our program for 2019. That program envisaged, in the first instance, a claims and objections period, which started sometime in December, and subsequently house-to-house registration. So until such time as GECOM is advised on the date of elections and things of that nature, GECOM is looking towards its 2019 program, which was intended to include a claims and objections period and a house-to-house registration. I dare say hastily that the pursuit of the 2019 program would not inhibit GECOM's preparation for elections when that date is announced, because a major element of the preparation for elections would be the preparation of a list. And a house-to-house registration would lead to such a preparation. So though there is no declared date, what is going to be happening at GECOM would not be a hindrance to GECOM moving into election mode once the announcement is made.
Desmond?
Yeah, I'd like to add something to what Vincent has said, because he has very correctly outlined what took place yesterday. But what took place yesterday really was as a result of discussions over a period of time in which it was very clear that we were informed as a result of the discussions and as a result of information coming from the Secretariat that it was impossible for us to advise that elections could be held within the constitutional March deadline. It was impossible for us to do so. And so that after, as I said, exhaustive deliberations, we thought it was the correct thing to do to advise that at this juncture, we cannot, GECOM will not be able to hold elections by the March 19th deadline.
But surely the noises that we are hearing and the opinions and the editorials and what have you seem to say the Constitution is like for crusties. you've got to cut the limbs off to make the thing fit. So GECOM has to cut off a limb, a leg, or whatever, and fit into this constitutional provision. Is that the case?
You know, sometimes if you attempt to cut limbs, you might well create a lifeless body afterwards. So let's draw that analogy as well. GECOM cannot hold an elections within 90 days, given what is required of GECOM. It would be foolhardy of GECOM to embark on an exercise which it knows it cannot complete in that time. The things which are required makes it impossible. We have datelines that we have to observe in terms of things. Some things take 35 days as a dateline. Some things take 21 days as the dateline. When you add up those datelines, 90 days is impossible. So we are facing the impossibility, an impossibility which obviously the Constitution anticipated, because whilst on one hand, the Constitution says in 90 days, the next provision of the Constitution says that it may be extended. So the Constitution anticipates the possibility of an extension. In that context, GECOM's responsibility is to inform the powers that be what is possible. So we're not in defiance of any constitution. We are to inform the powers that be what's possible. They are then to exercise their minds on the provisions of the Constitution, which on one hand says 90 days, but on the other hand says it can be more than 90 days with agreement. And so one has to take cognizance of what Professor Duke Pollard has said, that you cannot read 106.6 and 106.7 disjointively. They have to be read conjointively. If they're read conjointively, then there is no the defiance of the Constitution if GECOM gives the advice of what's practical for the political actors to act upon.
But Desmond, why is it so hard for people to understand that? I had a mother used to say sometimes, we're too bright for our own good.
I think that people's decision as to where their own understanding of the situation depends on where they stand in the entire framework. And if it is that you believe that you should ignore all of the things that Vincent said that GECOM has to do, you will argue that the elections could be held. But if it is that you take into consideration, as we've been attempting to do, all of the things that have to be done, you will agree that elections can be held in the time frame. Look, I want to tell you something. One of the things that, one of the arguments that have been made, and there are two shades of this argument, is this, that GECOM is empowered to ensure that all of those persons who are entitled to vote at elections must be able to do so. But there's an argument which is being made that you can disenfranchise those persons just so that you allow for the elections to be held within this so-called time frame. Now, those are the difficulties that we face with, because those persons who have argued that the elections must take into consideration all of the eligible persons are holding fast to that position. And I want to say that I'm one of those persons.
Enrico, I think both yourself and Desmond have been kind in suggesting that people do not understand. I don't think the question is one of not understanding. I think they very well understand. But people are pursuing what they perceive to be in their interests. And that is what is causing the problem. It's not a not understanding. Early, we have been deliberating for about 3 weeks now in this matter. Very early deliberations, a clear understanding was expressed by the same people that we couldn't do it in 90 days.
90 days.
The fact that the president and the leader of the opposition sent emissaries to GECOM itself speaks to the fact that they understood that we may not be able to do it in 90 days. If they were of the view collectively that we had to do it in 90 days, what would be the need for emissaries? You simply call the election, keeping the 90-day schedule. But the fact that they send the emissaries to find out GECOM's state of preparedness itself signals that they understood that the chances are it could not be done in 90 days. And I dare say that there was an emergent consensus in GECOM in the earlier days that 90 days would not work. But then people started drawing lines.
And the fact that they drew these lines is intended to force GECOM into a position, do you think?
I'm not sure what it was intended to do. It was grandstanding, certainly. But I'm not sure what it was intended to do. Because you can't, politicians, you're never quite sure what they're up to. You're never quite sure what they're up to, but you know exactly what the facts are. And the facts are that they were grandstanding and holding on to 90 days to the exclusion of everything else. You know, the idea of 90 days included the possibility of an election simply using the local government list. Now, what does that mean? It means this. For local government, a list was prepared. That list did not see claims and objections being conducted in the areas where there are no local government bodies. It means, therefore, that if you were simply to use that list and not have claims and objections across the country, that persons who qualified at the qualifying date in October of last year would have been left off of the list. They would not have been allowed onto the list because you're just using the list as is.
As is.
This thing about using the list excludes the possibility of claims and objections that allows for persons who are on the register of registrants but did not meet the qualifying date in October of last year, those persons would not have been brought onto the list. So though they would have been registered, they're in the National Register of Registrants, they would not have qualified in October. And since you're using a list with a qualifying date of October last year, they would have been excluded. Also, I'm saying the persons who were in those areas which were not local government areas did not have the opportunity of the claims and objections which were held for local government, and therefore they too would have been left off. So that this is an act of disenfranchisement. And people seem not to understand that the Constitution also provides for GECOM to run what is called an efficient election. That's part of GECOM's responsibilities, not merely for GECOM to observe 106. It's for GECOM to observe all that there is in the Constitution. And that includes running an efficient election. And how could GECOM claim to run an efficient election when it consciously excludes voters from being on the list when there is the opportunity for them to be on the list, and you go ahead and exclude them?
But Enrico, I want to say, in response to the question that you raised about if people didn't want to, why people can't understand this, and I said that it depends on where they stand. Because there's an insistence that persons should not be disenfranchised, the existence of GECOM was threatened. Because we were told that if it is that we continue to hold fast to the positions that all eligible persons must have an opportunity to cast their votes, we were told that once there is a change of government, then GECOM will be disbanded. You can recall that.
Yes.
I can get back to that just now.
Yeah.
But going back to what Vincent was saying with regard to the local government elections, the list was good then, to some. How is it bad now, to some others? But I, like the little boy, sometimes I don't quite understand everything. Explain to me again, why is the list good or why is the list bad? I try to follow what you were saying with regard to some constituencies, but the country is one constituency for a national election, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm a little confused.
All right,
Why?
let's talk list. GECOM in 2012 took a decision that they needed to do a house-to-house every 7 years. That decision was premised on the understanding that there would be inadequacies in your list after a certain period of time. So without any reference to any election, it is the standard understanding that your list should be redone periodically. Point one. GECOM has sought to do that in previous years, but the funds were not provided. In 2019, the funds have been provided for GECOM to do what should have been done 4 years ago. They've been provided with the funds. So that the program is for GECOM to do a house-to-house and a new list in 2019. 2018, we didn't have the funds. Good or bad list, we didn't have the funds, so we couldn't do it. So there was no issue of us arguing the case. We did put up in our budget for 2018 for the funds. So GECOM's position was we should have done it in 2018. Our position was we should have done it in 2017. Our position is we've gotten the money in 2019, and what should have been done is now to be done because the resources are available. So that's point one, about the goodness or the badness of the list. If one wants to be sincere, all of the commissioners from different perspectives in 2017, in 2016, argued that there was need for the list to be sanitized. All of the commissioners argued that case. In 2016, 2017, 2018, it is the same argument that led to us unanimously agreeing that the budget request should be made. So the question of some people and others is not a real question because everyone prior to this moment were of the like mind of the need to sanitize the list. Now let's be practical. In 2006 elections, I think it was, there was an incident on the East Coast where there was the accusation of staged voting by a particular political party. They were bringing people to the place of poll and staging voting on behalf of people who were not physically present. That complaint in that year was brought to the attention of the then Chief Elections Officer, who said at the time that the matter would be looked into. It was never looked into. Similarly, in 2011, no, not 2011, 2006, in the case of the AFC, are my dates right?
Yeah.
In Linden.
In Linden, you're correct. Yeah.
When Sam Hines was allocated a seat for which he was not entitled. And the matter was brought to that same chief elections officer. He told the AFC, we'll look into the matter, declare the results, then told them go to court. In 2011, in Eccles, we had to replace the presiding officer because that presiding officer in 2011 was allowing stage voting in Eccles. And it was found out during the course of the election, was brought to the attention of the commission, and the presiding officer was replaced.
What do you mean by stage voting?
That's a good question. I'm making this case because stage voting could result from a bloated list. When the list has people who are not physically present, dead or alive but not physically present, it allows for people to impersonate the absent person and seek to vote in the name of the absent person. And I'm saying that in 2011, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that was happening in Eccles. So I'm showing you that with a bloated list, a list of 500 and something thousand plus persons, in a country of 700 and something thousand plus persons, where over 100,000 of those persons on the 500 and something thousand are not resident or alive, it provides an opportunity for smart guys to try to stage voting using the names of the persons who are not present. And so one needs to eliminate that possibility by having a new list of people recently registered, so that in fact you're dealing with the registered and present people rather than the dead and absent people. That's the reality of this list.
Desmond, because I'm going to ask, well, if people are there to stage, weren't they registered to begin with? The people who are doing the staging.
They would have voted twice. Voted for themselves, and then returned to vote for somebody else.
But you have to do your finger, and you have to do all the other things.
There's a lot of science about that. GECOM has a number of safeguards, including the ink. One of the complaints of the local government elections that I heard was that the ink did not manifest itself properly till the next day. That was one of the claims in the local government elections. That the day in question, you put your hand in the ink, yes, you ink your hand, you see the wetness, but the real coloration that could make someone on sight recognize that you had voted wasn't quite manifest until the next day. So I can't rest my 100% in the ink in that circumstance.
So the idea, go ahead.
Yeah, but the list itself was the subject of an election petition in 2015. That matter has not been concluded. It became the subject of concern precisely for the reason that Vincent referred to just now, that there was staged voting taking place in a number of constituencies. Additionally, in 2018, a commissioner came to the commission and he said, look, I have reasons to be concerned about this list because the population is 750,000 and the list, the numbers on the list is 660,000. And he argued that that list had to be cleansed. Now, the argument he made was consistent with the concerns that commissioners have had over time. I'm the latest addition to the commission. I only came on the commission in 2017, November 2017. But over time, I have developed my own concerns about the list because on the advice of experts, the argument has been that there is no way in which it is that the electoral list, the numbers on the electoral list, could be consistent with the population figures. And so that there always has been concerns about that, and the commitment to ensure that you get the list sanitized. You know, sanitizing the list will also lead to the acceptance of the election results. Because, Enrico, you know that over time, there has been trauma at every election. And there has been trauma partially because persons have complained that the list is not representative of what the population, the numbers is.
And this election petition to which you referred was brought by who?
That petition was brought by the PPP in 2015. It's not yet been heard, but if one reads the petition, in that petition, grounds that they have put forward are the same issues that we are arguing today about the state of the list. And that's why we're saying that people are looking after interests. There's no principles involved here. There's no lack of understanding involved here. It's what suits your purpose that you go after. And there must be some purpose in a body of people who were critical to the point of election petition of the list, 3 years after saying, no problem, let's use it.
There's a case of talking for sun and talking for rain.
Certainly.
Certainly, that's how it is.
So why is it that the Election Commission would want to meet with the ABC and EU countries, and what is it you'd want to tell them?
Well, you've gotten it wrong.
No, they
They've requested to meet.
Sometimes journalists ask it wrong, so you can put it right.
Well, they have requested to meet, and we've acquiesced to the request.
And
So
why?
they're the ones who are going to be posing the question. They've specified that they have an interest to be informed about how GECOM is approaching the matter and how it can be best approached, and we've acquiesced.
And you have.
That's one of the things on which the Commission has been unanimous.
And you have decided in your minds as government-nominated commissioners what you're going to say, Vincent, to them, and what you're going to say, Desmond, to them?
I only say what is factual. I don't have to decide in my mind. I say what is factual, beginning and end.
I go with the same attitude. I'm not going to be, and as I said, even though I'm a government-nominated commissioner, the government has never attempted to influence my thinking in relation to what is happening at GECOM. But I go with my own positions, and I represent those positions. And my position is consistent with what I believe the people out there want. I'm quite sure that Vincent also assumed that position.
You know, if our journalists were to do a lot of groundwork, there is so much that they could say. For example, if they were to see what commissioners do before they come to a GECOM meeting, and what they do after they leave a GECOM meeting, they would start to understand the nature of things.
So what do you do?
I come from home. I don't stop anywhere. And when I'm finished, I go home. I don't stop anywhere. But if the journalists were to investigate me, investigate others, they may tell the true story.
Well, you tell us the true story.
I don't go behind anybody to see where they go. I'm just saying the journalists did their work.
Desmond, you come from home too?
Well, I have a job other than the one that I am, other than at GECOM. And so that in most cases, most instances, I come from my job to GECOM. But the difference here, and I want to make this point strongly, that I do not, on my way to GECOM, or on my way from home to wherever, I do not have to stop at a political party to be instructed. And there's no political leader or political person who can call me and instruct me on how to, on what my thinking should be at GECOM sessions.
We're hearing that we're heading into a constitutional crisis if this drop dead 90-day line is crossed. I recall in 1990, I think, Desmond Hoyt, who was then president, called an election. And then GECOM wasn't quite ready. It was, I think, Rudy Collins was the chairman at the time. And then they had to do a little.
Parliament was recalled,
Yeah.
and elections were postponed, rescheduled. So the 1990 elections
Were held in
eventually
1992. But Enrico, if you can recall, the thing that led to the recall of Parliament had to do with the list.
Exactly.
Had to do
I
with
could
it.
recall. I wanted
Because
you to say.
there was a lot of agitation. I was involved in that agitation
I know.
for a new list. There was and incidentally, there's some people who are saying that, you know, we must abandon persons, themselves abandoned their own arguments in 1990. And we continued, and Mr. Hyde felt that it was important, even though he got a lot of flack from some of his own supporters, he went ahead, recalled Parliament, and put in place the mechanism for a new list. So it is this thing about ensuring that we have a list is nothing new. And as Vincent said, 1067 allows for an arrangement to be made that will ensure that all of the things that are necessary for holding an election that people will have confidence in is provided for.
Vincent, is it political gamemanship?
There's no other way to see it. There's absolutely no other way to see it. I can't call it otherwise. I prefer basically to state the facts, and the facts manifest themselves as some kind of game.
The argument I've heard too is that GECOM did not really call for house-to-house registration. It just said, well, the work program will continue.
GECOM's decision on Tuesday was that it will resort to its work program
for 2019.
for 2019. That work program includes house-to-house registration. In the circumstance of what happened on Tuesday, the Secretariat would have to come back to us with the specifics of what would occur hereafter in relation to that work program. Because, for example, that work program had required that we started C&O
In December?
in late December. Approximately 3 months have elapsed.
CNO's claims and
Claims
objections.
and
Claims and
objections.
objections. 3 months had elapsed. The idea was to get a list that would take us beyond April. So we have a list going, but whilst we go beyond April, we would then start house to house. And so by November, we would have had a completely new list. And so what is critical to note here, again about the question of people saying the list is not a good list, is that without any question of no confidence and elections in 90 days, that GECOM in December would have started a claims and objection period to allow persons who would have qualified to come on to the list and to allow for objections, even as it prepared itself for a house-to-house election. So in any circumstance,
That's the direction.
GECOM was going in the direction of updating on one hand the list and ultimately sanitizing through a house-to-house exercise. So I'm not sitting here and saying, look, tomorrow morning GECOM is going to start house-to-house. Tomorrow morning, GECOM will go back to the drawing board in relation to its work plan for 2019. That work plan had 2 aspects. Time has elapsed in terms of one aspect. Time has not elapsed in terms of another aspect. And we will make a determination as how we go forward with a work plan that said claims and objections and house-to-house registration.
Is it ever really possible to have elections in 90 days if you have to call a snap election?
let's answer that question this way. The GECOM had declared in 2014 that it would require 180 days to get ready for an election that was not previously scheduled. 180 days. GECOM had made that declaration. That declaration was made by Commissioner Steve Sursbally at the Cara Lodge press conference. 180 days. The idea of 90 days has to do with if elections is scheduled in a particular year, so you know you're going to have elections. And so even before the elections is called, you get into a certain level of preparation. So if it is called in 90 days, it is not as if you have to do all that we now have to do. Things would have been done. And so 90 days would only require certain statutory activities. So in that circumstance, where there is prior knowledge of an election, where it is not called a snap election, in the year in question, the Commission would have been preparing, though not specifically preparing for a particular date. When it is called, however, they would have been prepared to a certain point that allows only for statutory activities which could have been completed in 90 days.
Put in context the issue of the finances now, the funds to run the election as against the funds to do the house-to-house registration. What's the story there?
But as Vincent has said, the commissioners, all of the commissioners, sat down and I think it was sometime in November of 2018 and approved. No, and it would have been in
early
October.
November,
Yes,
yeah.
it would have been October. And approved a budget for that included a sum for the house-to-house registration. That was done by all of the commissioners. And the request went forward, and the money was appropriated. The law says that the money, because we had requested that the Secretariat ask the Ministry of Finance if the money could be wired. And we were advised no. That for you to be able to use money that has been allocated for a certain activity, you have to go to back to Parliament and get the permission of Parliament to do so.
Is it in the law or is it just?
It's in the law.
It's in the law.
Fiscal,
It's in the law.
Fiscal management and financial
Finance.
accountability
Yeah, it's in the law.
specifies that. But you cannot use an appropriation for purpose not intended. And that if you had another purpose, you have to go back to the National Assembly to get a new appropriation for that purpose.
But at the rate we go, we get with no confidence motions and so on. We should expect elections
Well,
every two, 3 years.
Two things, Henrico. It speaks to the problem that there is in the law itself, that there are conflicting provisions in our law, and that there is need for the Law Revision Commission to be at work. Because a part of the problem is the fact, even the decision of the judge, she herself said that there are things that need to be tidied up. Because you have recall, but you can't get the effect of recall. She said that in her judgment. So there are issues with the law. Now, the specific question about the appropriation. This is not the first time GECOM is confronted with this problem. It's the second time in recent times. If I'm not mistaken, for the elections 2015, we were confronted with the same problem of not having an appropriation. At that time, GECOM was a subvention agency. And we had to go to the
Dr. Lunch.
Office of the President, Dr. Luncheon, if we needed monies for an activity for which we did not have money. On that occasion, we did go to Dr. Luncheon, and he did get Cabinet to give us an unconfirmed decision. And on the basis of the unconfirmed decision, the Ministry of Finance made money available. That's what happened in 2015. We didn't just go and do our own thing. We are now a constitutional agency. So we can no longer go to a ministry. We have now to go to the parliament. That is where we get our appropriation. And what the law specifies is that where we want an appropriation for a particular activity, if not previously provided for, then we have to go to the National Assembly for them to grant us that appropriation.
And in the case of the luncheon scenario, it was, Parliament had already been paroled, wasn't it? Or
In the case of the luncheon scenario, we were a subvention agency. And we came under the supervision of the Office of the President. And what the Office of the President and luncheon in person did, because of the state of Parliament and things like that, they went for a unconfirmed decision. And they used that decision to instruct the Ministry of Finance to release the funds to us.
so we are headed where now? In terms of the Constitution, in terms of a crisis, in terms
We
of
have
elections,
advised,
and
we are advising the powers that be what's not possible. It is for them to use the constitutional provisions to make a determination
On the way
for what is possible.
and what are those constitutional provisions?
106,
106,
7, which clearly says if we can't do it in 90 days, that the Parliament will make provision for us to do it at some other time with a two-thirds majority. It requires mature political engagement.
What did you say?
It requires mature political engagement.
You see, very skeptical.
And anybody who doesn't engage in that has made a decision that whatever else to happen is what they want to happen.
And that's where I was going. The fact that we're quarreling about all these little things and being, you know, nitpicking about, in some cases, excuse the language, why should we have confidence that those in Parliament who are there will come to consensus?
I'm not
will come to a
expressing
compromise?
confidence or no confidence. I'm a commissioner of GECOM. GECOM has done what it can possibly do in the context of the situation.
The political
It's not
players.
the responsibility of others to play their role.
I think at this stage we should end the program. We're running out of time anyhow. So let me thank Commissioner Vincent Alexander and Commissioner Desmond Trotman for appearing on Context this evening. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Unless you have any parting words.
Certainly no parting words except to say we await the matured engagement that should take us forward.
And we will have to move forward as a country. Thank you once again for joining us on Context. I'm Enrico Wolford. Goodbye for now.